in the heart of 17th century Europe. Amidst the turmoil of shifting alliances and royal intrigues, a remarkable woman was born who would come to define the era's politics and culture: Caroline of Ansbach. Her story begins not in the palatial courts of power, but in the modest Duchy of Ansbach, a small territory within the Holy Roman Empire. From these unassuming origins, Caroline's life would become a testament to the transformative power of intellect, charm, and ambition. Caroline was born on March 1st, 1683, to Johann Friedrich, Margrave of Brandenburg-Ansbach, and Eleanor Erdmouth of Saxe-Eisenach. Tragedy struck early, as she lost both her parents before reaching adolescence, leaving her to navigate the uncertainties of a noble but precarious future. Despite these challenges, Caroline's early life was defined by an insatiable curiosity and an extraordinary intellect. She excelled in languages, philosophy, and theology, standing out in an era when such pursuits were often reserved for men. Her formative years were spent at the court of Frederick I of Prussia, where she cultivated a sharp political acumen and refined manners that would later captivate the British aristocracy. It was here that Caroline developed a lifelong love for learning. Influenced by leading thinkers of the Enlightenment, these early years forged the foundation of a woman who would one day wield quiet but formidable power behind the throne of England. In 1705, Caroline's destiny took a pivotal turn. She caught the attention of George Augustus, the young and ambitious Elector of Hanover, during a carefully arranged introduction at a courtly gathering. George was immediately drawn to Caroline's wit and poise, a rare combination that set her apart from other noblewomen of the time. Their union, based not just on duty but mutual respect and affection, would become one of the most enduring and politically significant royal marriages in British history. As Caroline stepped into her role as consort, her influence on George Augustus became unmistakable. She was not content to merely stand by her husband's side, but actively shaped his decisions, tempered his temper, and guided his ambitions. Together, they navigated the complex landscape of Hanoverian and British politics, with Caroline emerging as a trusted confidant and advisor. This introduction sets the stage for a journey through Caroline's life, a tale of resilience, ambition, and the quiet but profound influence of a queen who shaped the course of a nation. From the modest halls of Ansbach to the glittering courts of London, Caroline's legacy would echo long after her time, leaving an indelible mark on history. The story of Caroline of Ansbach truly begins in the lush, rolling hills of the Franconian region in what is now southern Germany. Born into the modest but noble house of Brandenburg-Ansbach, Caroline Wilhelmina Charlotte entered the world on March 1st, 1683. Her father, Johann Friedrich, Margrave of Brandenburg-Ansbach, ruled over a small principality within the sprawling and fragmented Holy Roman Empire. Although his realm was unremarkable in size or influence, Johann Friedrich sought to provide a cultured and intellectual upbringing for his children. Caroline's mother, Eleanor Erdmouth of Saxe-Eisenach, was a woman of piety and refinement, traits that would leave an indelible mark on Caroline during her formative years. Caroline's early life, however, was overshadowed by loss. At the age of 3, she lost her father to illness, leaving her mother to shoulder the burden of raising her and her siblings. Tragedy struck again when Eleanor Erdmouth remarried and moved to Saxony, only to succumb to her own ailments shortly after. Orphaned at a tender age, Caroline faced an uncertain future. Yet, even in her grief, she exhibited a resilience that would define her character throughout her life. Placed under the guardianship of her maternal relatives, Caroline was sent to the Prussian court of Frederick I and his formidable wife, Queen Sophie Charlotte. This move proved to be a turning point. Sophie Charlotte, herself an exceptional woman of intellect and sophistication, quickly recognized Caroline's potential. She took the young girl under her wing, fostering her education in philosophy, theology, and the arts. At court, Caroline was exposed to the luminaries of the Enlightenment, including Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, whose ideas on metaphysics and rationalism deeply influenced her thinking. Caroline's intelligence and charm quickly set her apart. Unlike many noblewomen of her time, she did not merely accept the limited roles prescribed to her gender. Instead, she embraced learning with an intensity that astonished even her tutors. She became fluent in multiple languages, including German, French, and English, and developed a keen interest in political philosophy. Her voracious reading of the works of Descartes, Spinoza, and Locke not only expanded her intellectual horizons, but also prepared her for the challenges she would later face as a queen. By the time she reached adolescence, Caroline had blossomed into a striking young woman. Her beauty, though not conventional, was complemented by her quick wit and graceful demeanor. She was often described as possessing a radiance of spirit that drew others to her. Word of her intelligence and refinement spread throughout the courts of Europe, and she soon became a sought-after match for princes and nobles. However, Caroline was not one to be easily swayed by titles or wealth. When Frederick William, Crown Prince of Prussia, expressed his desire to marry her, she famously refused, though his rank was impressive. Frederick William's volatile temper and austere lifestyle did not align with Caroline's vision of partnership. She shocked many by turning down such a powerful suitor, but her decision was a testament to her independence and determination to shape her own destiny. It was during this time that Caroline first encountered George Augustus, the Elector of Hanover's son and heir. Their meeting was orchestrated at a courtly gathering, where George was immediately captivated by Caroline's intellect and vivacity. Unlike many royal matches of the era, their relationship was not solely rooted in political convenience. George admired Caroline's strength of character and sought her counsel even in their early courtship. For her part, Caroline saw in George a partner who respected her mind and valued her opinions, a rarity among noblemen of the time. Their courtship, though brief, was marked by mutual affection and respect. George, known for his fiery temper and impulsive nature, found in Caroline a calming influence. She tempered his outbursts with her steady wisdom and often guided him toward more prudent decisions. They married in 1705, a union that would not only secure Caroline's place in the Hanoverian dynasty, but also lay the groundwork for one of the most influential partnerships in British history. After their marriage, Caroline and George settled in Hanover, where they began their life together amidst the intrigues and rivalries of the German principalities. Caroline quickly proved herself to be more than a mere consort. She immersed herself in the political affairs of the court, forging alliances and navigating the complex web of relationships that characterized the Holy Roman Empire. Her sharp political instincts and diplomatic finesse earned her the respect of courtiers and foreign dignitaries alike. One of Caroline's most notable contributions during this period was her ability to mediate between George and his father, the Elector of Hanover. The relationship between father and son was notoriously strained, marked by frequent disputes over power and policy. Caroline often acted as a bridge between the two, using her diplomatic skills to defuse tensions and maintain stability within the court. Her efforts not only strengthened her husband's position, but also ensured a more unified Hanoverian front in the face of external threats. Despite her growing responsibilities, Caroline remained deeply committed to her personal growth. She continued to correspond with leading intellectuals of the day, discussing topics ranging from theology to natural sciences. Her interest in the emerging ideas of the Enlightenment positioned her as a progressive figure, even as she operated within the conservative confines of a royal court. As the years passed, Caroline's influence within the Hanoverian court grew. Her ability to balance the demands of politics with her role as a wife and mother earned her widespread admiration. By the time her father-in-law ascended to the British throne as George I in 1714, Caroline had already established herself as an indispensable figure in her husband's life and career. Little did she know, the move to Britain would bring new challenges and opportunities, thrusting her into the heart of one of the most powerful monarchies in the world. In the chapters that follow, Caroline's journey from a duchess in a small German principality to the Queen Consort of Great Britain will unfold, a story of resilience, ambition, and the quiet but profound influence of a woman who shaped the course of history. Caroline's journey from a principality in the Holy Roman Empire to the heart of British royalty hinged on a single, pivotal meeting with George Augustus, the heir to the Electorate of Hanover. In the autumn of 1704, destiny brought them together at the court of Hanover during one of the many grand gatherings that punctuated the lives of Europe's nobility. George Augustus, then in his early 20s, was a spirited young man with a reputation for impulsiveness and a fierce sense of independence. While his fiery temper often alienated others, his undeniable charm and keen military acumen made him a prominent figure among the German princes of his time. Caroline, by contrast, was a young woman whose quiet confidence and intellectual depth set her apart. Although her circumstances were far from grand, being an orphan of modest means in a minor German principality, her reputation for intelligence and poise had preceded her. Many potential matches had been suggested for George Augustus, yet none had sparked his interest. However, the moment he met Caroline, the atmosphere shifted. Their introduction, facilitated by courtiers who saw the potential for a union, was hardly love at first sight in the traditional sense. Instead, it was an immediate meeting of minds. George Augustus, accustomed to flattery and superficial conversations, was struck by Caroline's candor and the way she carried herself with unassuming dignity. She, in turn, found his directness refreshing, though she quickly recognized that beneath his bravado lay a man seeking a partner who could ground him. Over the next few weeks, George pursued Caroline with determination. While many women of the court sought his favor, Caroline remained composed, treating him not as a prince to be courted but as an equal. This dynamic intrigued George, who found himself drawn to her forthrightness and intellect. Their conversations ranged from the practicalities of governance to philosophical debates on morality, reflecting their shared belief in the power of ideas to shape nations. Caroline's initial hesitation about George was rooted in pragmatism. While she admired his energy and charisma, she understood that marrying into the Hanoverian dynasty came with significant challenges. The Hanoverian court was known for its intense rivalries, particularly between George Augustus and his father, George Louis, the Elector of Hanover. The relationship between the two men was fraught with conflict, often erupting into public displays of hostility. Caroline, with her sharp political instincts, knew that navigating such a family dynamic would require all of her diplomacy and resilience. Yet, as she spent more time with George, Caroline began to see the potential for a true partnership. She recognized that, beneath his tempestuous exterior, he valued her opinions in a way few men of his rank would. More importantly, he treated her not as a subordinate but as someone whose intellect and judgment he respected. This mutual understanding laid the foundation for a bond that would endure the many trials of their marriage. Their courtship culminated in a lavish wedding in 1705, an event that solidified Caroline's position within the Hanoverian dynasty. The ceremony, attended by dignitaries from across Europe, was as much a political statement as a celebration of their union. For Caroline, the marriage was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would see her leave behind the familiar world of Ansbach and step into the volatile landscape of Hanoverian politics. Life in Hanover was not without its challenges. Caroline quickly discovered that her role as George's wife extended far beyond the domestic sphere. As the elector's son and heir, George Augustus was a prominent figure in the court, and Caroline was expected to support him in both personal and political matters. She took to this role with characteristic determination, immersing herself in the intricacies of Hanoverian governance and courtly etiquette. From the outset, Caroline proved to be an invaluable partner to George. While he often acted on impulse, she provided the measured perspective needed to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined the Holy Roman Empire. Her diplomatic skills were particularly evident in her interactions with George's father, the Elector of Hanover. The relationship between George Augustus and his father was notoriously strained, with the two men clashing over everything from military strategy to personal conduct. Caroline, with her calm demeanor and sharp mind, often acted as a mediator, easing tensions and fostering a sense of unity within the family. Despite the challenges, Caroline's influence on George became increasingly apparent. She encouraged him to temper his fiery temper and focus on long-term goals, particularly his ambitions for the British throne. Under her guidance, George began to develop a more strategic approach to leadership, one that balanced his natural charisma with the patience and foresight required of a future king. Their personal life, too, flourished during this period. Over the course of their marriage, Caroline and George would have 8 children. Though not all survived to adulthood, Caroline was a devoted mother, ensuring that her children received the best education and upbringing possible. Her influence on their development was profound, shaping the values and priorities of the next generation of Hanoverian royalty. As the years passed, Caroline's role within the Hanoverian court continued to evolve. She became known not only for her political acumen but also for her compassion and generosity. Her efforts to improve the lives of those around her, from courtiers to commoners, earned her widespread admiration. She was particularly dedicated to supporting education and the arts, laying the groundwork for her later role as a patron of culture in Britain. By 1714, the stage was set for a dramatic turn in Caroline and George's lives. With the death of Queen Anne, the British throne passed to George Louis, the Elector of Hanover, under the terms of the Act of Settlement. This event marked the beginning of the Hanoverian dynasty in Britain and set the wheels in motion for Caroline and George Augustus to leave behind the familiar halls of Hanover and embark on a new chapter as Prince and Princess of Wales. Caroline's meeting with George Augustus was more than a romantic union. It was the start of a partnership that would shape the course of British history. Together, they would navigate the tumultuous transition from the German principalities to the British monarchy, forging a legacy that would endure for generations. As they prepared to cross the North Sea and claim their place in London's royal court, Caroline's steady presence and unyielding support would prove indispensable to George's rise to power. After their marriage in 1705, Caroline and George Augustus began their life together in Hanover, a small but strategically significant electorate within the sprawling Holy Roman Empire. Though its territories were modest compared to the great powers of Europe, Hanover's importance lay in its alliances and its rulers' ambitions. For Caroline, this new chapter presented both an opportunity to cement her role as George's partner and a test of her ability to navigate the often treacherous waters of court politics. Hanoverian politics were defined by rigid hierarchies, deep-seated rivalries, and constant maneuvering for power. At the center of this web was George Augustus's father, George Louis, the Elector of Hanover and a man renowned for his stern demeanor and political cunning. The electorate's proximity to larger, more powerful states such as Prussia and Austria meant that its survival depended on a delicate balance of diplomacy and military readiness. Into this world stepped Caroline, a young woman whose intelligence and poise quickly made her a key figure in her husband's court. From the outset, Caroline demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt. She immersed herself in the workings of the Hanoverian court, learning its customs and understanding the intricate relationships between its key players. Her education and natural charisma served her well, allowing her to form alliances with influential courtiers and foreign envoys. Unlike many consorts who were content to remain in the background, Caroline was an active participant in her husband's political life, often acting as his confidant and advisor. One of the first challenges Caroline faced was the volatile relationship between George Augustus and his father. The Elector of Hanover had high expectations for his son, viewing him as a key player in his broader strategy to elevate Hanover's status within the Holy Roman Empire. However, George Augustus's fiery temper and impulsive nature often clashed with his father's strict and calculated approach. Their disputes ranged from matters of governance to personal conduct, with both men unwilling to yield ground. Caroline quickly realized that her role extended beyond supporting her husband. She also needed to mediate between him and the elector. Her diplomatic skills came to the fore as she worked to defuse tensions and foster a sense of cooperation. Unlike many others at court, Caroline could speak frankly to both George Augustus and his father, earning their respect even as she navigated their complex dynamic. Her efforts not only strengthened her husband's position but also ensured a more stable environment within the court. Caroline's influence extended beyond family dynamics. She played a crucial role in shaping George Augustus's approach to governance, encouraging him to think strategically rather than reactively. While George was naturally drawn to displays of military prowess and grand gestures, Caroline urged him to focus on building alliances and cultivating loyalty among his subjects. Her counsel often proved invaluable, particularly in matters involving the intricate politics of the Holy Roman Empire. During this period, Caroline also began to establish herself as a patron of culture and education. She was deeply committed to the principles of the Enlightenment, believing that knowledge and reason were essential for progress. Her court became a gathering place for scholars, artists, and philosophers, many of whom were drawn to her intellect and curiosity. Among her closest correspondents was Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, one of the most prominent thinkers of the time. Their exchanges on philosophy, theology, and science not only enriched Caroline's understanding but also positioned Hanover as a center of intellectual activity. Despite the demands of court life, Caroline and George Augustus found moments of happiness in their personal lives. The birth of their first child, Frederick Louis, in 1707 was a cause for celebration, though it also brought its own set of challenges. As the heir to the Hanoverian legacy, Frederick's upbringing became a matter of intense scrutiny, with both George Louis and George Augustus seeking to shape his future. Caroline, ever the diplomat, worked to balance these competing influences, ensuring that her son received a well-rounded education that reflected her own values. However, life in Hanover was not without its hardships. The constant jockeying for power within the court created an atmosphere of tension, and Caroline often found herself the target of envy and suspicion. Her growing influence, particularly over George Augustus, was viewed by some as a threat to the established order. Rumors and gossip swirled, but Caroline faced these challenges with characteristic grace, refusing to be drawn into petty disputes. By 1714, the political landscape of Europe had shifted dramatically. The death of Queen and of Great Britain set in motion a chain of events that would transform Caroline and George Augustus's lives. Under the terms of the Act of Settlement, the British throne passed to George Louis, who became King George I of Great Britain. This event marked the beginning of the Hanoverian dynasty's rule in Britain and set the stage for Caroline and George Augustus to leave Hanover and assume their new roles as Prince and Princess of Wales. The move to Britain was both a triumph and a challenge. For Caroline, it meant leaving behind the familiar world of Hanover and stepping into the complexities of British politics and society. Yet, she approached this transition with the same determination and adaptability that had defined her life thus far. As she and George Augustus prepared to embark on their journey across the North Sea, Caroline's influence on her husband and her role in shaping his future were undeniable. In Hanover, Caroline had proven herself to be not just a consort but a partner and leader in her own right. Her ability to navigate the intricacies of court life, mediate familial conflicts, and promote the values of the Enlightenment had left a lasting impact on the electorate. As she prepared to take on the challenges of British royalty, Caroline carried with her the lessons and experiences that would make her one of the most influential figures of her time. The year 1714 marked a seismic shift in the lives of Caroline and George Augustus. With the death of Queen and of Great Britain, the Act of Settlement ensured that the British crown would pass to George Augustus's father, George Louis, Elector of Hanover. This event, rooted in the desire to secure a Protestant succession, brought the Hanoverian dynasty to the forefront of British politics. For Caroline and George Augustus, it meant leaving behind the world they had known and stepping into a new and unfamiliar realm of power, influence, and intrigue. The transition from Hanover to Britain was fraught with challenges. While the Hanoverians were hailed by some as saviors of the Protestant faith, others viewed them as foreign usurpers. Britain was a nation deeply divided, with lingering Jacobite support for the exiled Stuart dynasty simmering beneath the surface. For Caroline, this was not just a geographical relocation, but an entirely new political and cultural battlefield. Yet, as always, she faced the task with determination and a clear sense of purpose. Caroline and George Augustus arrived in Britain with much fanfare but also significant skepticism. The British people, who had long been accustomed to the rule of the Stuarts, were wary of this new dynasty. The court, too, was rife with tension, as established factions vied for influence under the new regime. Caroline, with her keen intelligence and diplomatic finesse, quickly realized that her success in Britain would depend on her ability to adapt to this complex environment. One of her earliest challenges was the relationship between her husband and his father, now King George I of Great Britain. The animosity that had characterized their interactions in Hanover only deepened in Britain, as the pressures of ruling a new kingdom exacerbated old wounds. George Augustus resented the limited authority granted to him as Prince of Wales, while George I viewed his son's ambition with suspicion. Their disputes often spilled into public view, creating an atmosphere of tension that threatened to destabilize the court. Caroline once again found herself in the role of mediator. She worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between her husband and his father, though her efforts were met with mixed success. While she was able to ease some of the immediate tensions, the fundamental differences between the two men remained unresolved. Despite this, Caroline's influence on George Augustus was unmistakable. She encouraged him to channel his frustrations into productive endeavors, urging him to focus on building his own base of support within Britain. Caroline's adaptability was also evident in her approach to British society. Unlike some foreign consorts who struggled to connect with their new subjects, Caroline made a concerted effort to understand and engage with British culture. She took an active interest in the country's politics, economy, and traditions, winning over many who had initially viewed her with suspicion. Her fluency in English, acquired during her time in Hanover, allowed her to communicate directly with British courtiers and politicians, further strengthening her position. One of Caroline's key strategies was to align herself with influential figures within the British government. Chief among them was Sir Robert Walpole, a shrewd politician who would later become Britain's first de facto prime minister. Recognizing Walpole's skill and pragmatism, Caroline cultivated a close relationship with him, often acting as a bridge between him and George Augustus. This alliance proved invaluable, as Walpole's guidance helped the Hanoverians navigate the intricacies of British governance. Caroline's influence extended beyond politics. She quickly established herself as a patron of the arts and sciences, continuing the legacy she had begun in Hanover. Her support for composers like George Frideric Handel and her engagement with Enlightenment thinkers endeared her to Britain's intellectual elite. She also took a keen interest in charitable endeavors, advocating for initiatives to improve education and healthcare for the poor. These efforts not only reflected her personal values but also helped to build goodwill among the British people. Despite her many successes, Caroline's time as Princess of Wales was not without difficulties. Her relationship with her eldest son, Frederick Louis, became increasingly strained as he grew older. Sent to Hanover as a child, Frederick returned to Britain as a young man with ambitions of his own. The rivalry between Frederick and George Augustus mirrored the tensions between George Augustus and George I, creating a generational cycle of conflict that Caroline struggled to mitigate. Caroline also faced the challenge of navigating courtly rivalries. The arrival of the Hanoverians had disrupted the existing power dynamics within the British aristocracy, leading to a flurry of alliances and betrayals. Caroline's growing influence made her a target for criticism, particularly from those who resented her close relationship with Walpole. Yet, she weathered these challenges with characteristic poise, focusing on the larger goal of securing her family's position within Britain. The culmination of Caroline's efforts came in 1727, when George I passed away, and George Augustus ascended to the throne as George II. For Caroline, this marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which her role as consort would take on even greater significance. Her years in Britain had prepared her for this moment, shaping her into a leader who could navigate the complexities of monarchy with intelligence and grace. As queen consort, Caroline would continue to play a central role in shaping the Hanoverian dynasty's legacy. Yet, even as she stepped into this new position of power, she carried with her the lessons of her journey, the resilience forged in Hanover, the diplomacy honed in Britain, and the unwavering commitment to her family and her principles. Her story was far from over, but it was clear that Caroline of Ansbach was no ordinary consort. She was a queen in every sense of the word. When George Augustus ascended to the throne as King George II in 1727, Caroline of Ansbach became queen consort of Great Britain and Ireland. This moment marked the culmination of her years of preparation, adaptation, and influence. As queen, Caroline wielded a level of power and influence rare for a consort, shaping not only her husband's reign, but also the political and cultural life of the nation. Her intelligence, diplomacy, and forward-thinking ideals transformed the perception of the Hanoverian monarchy, cementing her legacy as one of Britain's most remarkable queens. Caroline's role as queen was defined by her unique partnership with George II. Unlike many royal marriages of the time, theirs was built on mutual respect and affection. While George's temper and impulsiveness were well known, he relied heavily on Caroline for her calm judgment and sharp intellect. She became his most trusted advisor, often attending council meetings and discussing matters of state with him in private. Behind the scenes, Caroline's steady hand guided many of George's decisions, from military strategy to domestic policy. Her influence was particularly evident in her relationship with Sir Robert Walpole, the Prime Minister. Recognizing his political acumen, Caroline supported Walpole's leadership and acted as an intermediary between him and the king. Walpole, in turn, recognized Caroline's importance, famously referring to her as the real power behind the throne. Through her alliance with Walpole, Caroline helped to stabilize the government and steer Britain through a period of political turbulence. One of Caroline's most significant contributions as queen was her commitment to Enlightenment ideals. She believed in the power of education, reason, and progress to improve society, and she used her position to promote these values. Under her patronage, the arts and sciences flourished. She supported composers like George Frideric Handel, commissioning works that would become cornerstones of British cultural heritage. Handel's Zadok the Priest, performed at every British coronation since, was first composed for George II's coronation, a testament to Caroline's appreciation for artistic excellence. Caroline also engaged with leading intellectuals of her time, including the philosopher John Locke and the scientist Isaac Newton. She hosted salons at court, where thinkers and writers could exchange ideas, and encouraged the dissemination of knowledge through libraries and publications. Her commitment to intellectual advancement was not just a personal passion but a strategic effort to position Britain as a leader in the Enlightenment. In addition to her cultural contributions, Caroline championed charitable causes, particularly those aimed at improving healthcare and education. She was instrumental in the establishment of the Foundling Hospital in London, a refuge for abandoned children that became a symbol of compassion and social responsibility. Caroline's involvement in these initiatives earned her the admiration of the public and strengthened the monarchy's connection to the people. However, Caroline's role as queen was not without challenges. Her relationship with her eldest son, Frederick, Prince of Wales, was deeply strained. Frederick had been left behind in Hanover during his parents' early years in Britain, and his return as an adult only exacerbated the tensions within the royal family. Caroline found Frederick's behavior reckless and self-serving. While Frederick resented his parents' authority and sought to carve out his own political identity, their animosity became a public spectacle, with Frederick openly opposing his parents in court and parliament. Despite these familial conflicts, Caroline remained focused on her duties as queen. She worked tirelessly to support George II's reign, often acting as a stabilizing force during times of crisis. Her ability to navigate political intrigue and personal rivalries was unmatched, and her presence at court was a source of strength for both her husband and the nation. Caroline's health, however, began to decline as the years went on. Her relentless dedication to her role took a toll on her physical well-being, and by the mid-1730s, she was suffering from chronic ailments. Yet, even in the face of illness, she continued to fulfill her responsibilities with grace and determination. Her final years were marked by a sense of urgency, as she sought to secure the legacy of the Hanoverian dynasty and ensure the stability of the kingdom. In November 1737, Caroline fell gravely ill. Despite the best efforts of her physicians, she passed away on November 20th. Surrounded by her family, her death was a profound loss for George II, who mourned her deeply and never remarried. He famously declared, "She was my guide, my advisor, my everything." Caroline's impact as queen extended far beyond her lifetime. She had transformed the role of consort into one of active engagement and influence, demonstrating that a queen could be more than a ceremonial figure. Through her patronage, diplomacy, and unwavering commitment to her ideals, Caroline had left an indelible mark on British history. Her legacy as a queen, wife, mother, and cultural patron continued to shape the monarchy and the nation for generations to come. In her life, Caroline had been a bridge between tradition and progress, between Hanover and Britain, and between the monarchy and its people. In her death, she became a symbol of what a royal consort could achieve, inspiring future generations to follow in her footsteps. Caroline of Ansbach's life as a mother was as complex and multifaceted as her role as queen, while her intellect and diplomacy made her an effective partner in governance. Her family life was often marked by tension and heartache, particularly in her relationship with her eldest son, Frederick, Prince of Wales. This chapter of her story is one of personal conflict intertwined with the political realities of royal life, illustrating the challenges of balancing familial love and duty to the crown. From the moment Frederick Louis was born in 1707, his life was destined to be defined by the expectations placed upon him as the heir to the Hanoverian dynasty. Caroline and George Augustus, then still living in Hanover, were young parents navigating the pressures of court life. For Caroline, motherhood was both a joy and a duty. She was deeply invested in her children's upbringing, ensuring they received the best education and moral guidance possible. She believed in the Enlightenment ideals of reason and learning, and she sought to instill these values in her children. Frederick, however, spent much of his childhood separated from his parents. When George Augustus and Caroline moved to Britain in 1714 following the accession of George I, Frederick was left behind in Hanover, ostensibly to complete his education. This decision, while not uncommon for royal families at the time, created a physical and emotional distance that would have lasting consequences. By the time Frederick joined his family in Britain as a young adult, the bonds between mother and son had been significantly weakened. The strained relationship between Caroline and Frederick was compounded by their vastly different personalities. Caroline, a woman of reason and discipline, found Frederick's behavior impulsive and often self-serving. Frederick, in turn, resented what he perceived as his parents' overbearing control and favoritism toward his younger siblings. He sought to assert his independence, frequently aligning himself with political factions opposed to his father's government. These actions not only deepened the rift within the family, but also brought Frederick I into conflict with the court and parliament. Caroline's frustrations with Frederick were not limited to his political alliances. She disapproved of his lifestyle, which she viewed as indulgent and reckless. Frederick's reputation for gambling, womanizing, and associating with questionable characters further alienated him from his mother, Caroline, who had worked tirelessly to maintain the dignity and stability of the monarchy, saw Frederick's behavior as a threat to the family's legacy. Despite their differences, Caroline never entirely gave up on her eldest son. She continued to counsel him, albeit with a firm hand, and sought to guide him toward a more responsible path. In one particularly poignant moment, Caroline remarked, "My son is the greatest disappointment of my life, but I will never cease to hope for his redemption." This statement captures the depth of her frustration and the enduring maternal love that underpinned her relationship with Frederick. The tensions between Caroline and Frederick reached a breaking point in 1737, the year of Caroline's death. Frederick's public opposition to his parents culminated in a series of actions designed to undermine their authority. Most notably, he defiantly removed his pregnant wife, Augusta of Saxe-Gotha, from Hampton Court Palace against Caroline's wishes, claiming she was being mistreated. Augusta gave birth shortly thereafter in a rented London house, an event that scandalized the court and further eroded the fragile relationship between Frederick and his parents. Caroline's final confrontation with Frederick occurred on her deathbed. In her last days, she reportedly refused to see him, a decision that reflected the depth of her disappointment. When asked if she would forgive Frederick, Caroline replied, "I forgive him as a Christian, but not as a mother." These words, though harsh, reveal the profound pain she felt over their estrangement. While Caroline's relationship with Frederick was the most tumultuous, her role as a mother extended to her other children as well. She was deeply involved in their education and development, taking a particular interest in their intellectual and moral growth. Her second son, William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, became a military leader under her guidance, earning both fame and infamy for his role in the Jacobite uprising of 1745. Caroline's daughters, particularly Amelia and Caroline, shared her love of learning and became influential figures in their own right. Caroline's approach to motherhood was shaped by her belief in the power of education and reason. She sought to prepare her children for the responsibilities of their station, emphasizing the importance of duty and integrity. Yet, as her experience with Frederick demonstrates, even the most well-intentioned efforts could not always bridge the gaps created by personality clashes and external pressures. Beyond her immediate family, Caroline's maternal instincts extended to the broader public. As queen, she championed causes that reflected her compassionate nature, such as the establishment of hospitals and the improvement of conditions for the poor. She saw these efforts as an extension of her role as a mother, nurturing not just her own children but the nation as a whole. Caroline's death in 1737 marked the end of an era for the Hanoverian dynasty. Her passing left a void in the lives of her children, who struggled to fill the gap left by her guidance and support. For George, too, her absence was particularly profound. In the years following her death, he frequently spoke of Caroline with reverence, describing her as the foundation of his life and reign. The legacy of Caroline's motherhood is complex. While her relationship with Frederick was fraught with conflict, her influence on her other children and her contributions to the nation's welfare endure as a testament to her dedication and resilience. In balancing the demands of her public and private roles, Caroline set a standard for queenship that combined intellect, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to duty. Caroline's life as a mother reveals the human side of royalty, the struggles, heartbreaks, and triumphs that defined her family dynamic. It is a story of love and disappointment, of hope and perseverance, and of a woman who, despite her flaws, remained a steadfast pillar of strength for her family and her nation. Caroline of Ansbach's reign as Queen Consort was marked by her enduring commitment to the arts and intellectual life. She believed that culture and knowledge were not just luxuries for the elite but essential components of a thriving society. Through her patronage, Caroline played a pivotal role in fostering the arts, championing Enlightenment ideals, and shaping Britain's cultural identity during the 18th century. Her contributions would leave an indelible mark on the nation, positioning it as a center of artistic and intellectual excellence. Caroline's love for the arts was rooted in her upbringing at the court of Sophie Charlotte of Prussia, where she was exposed to the luminaries of the Enlightenment. This early education instilled in her a lifelong passion for music, philosophy, and science. As Queen Consort, she used her position to promote these interests on a grand scale, creating a court that became a beacon of cultural and intellectual activity. One of Caroline's most enduring legacies is her support for George Frideric Handel, the German-born composer who became a defining figure in British music. Caroline first encountered Handel during her time in Hanover, where he served as a court composer. Recognizing his talent, she maintained her patronage when she moved to Britain, providing him with opportunities to showcase his work. Handel's water music, famously performed for King George I during a river procession on the Thames, was one of the first pieces that cemented his reputation in Britain. As Queen, Caroline's relationship with Handel deepened. She commissioned several of his works, including the oratorio Esther and the anthem Zadok the Priest, which was composed for the coronation of George II and has been performed at every British coronation since. Caroline's unwavering support helped secure Handel's place as one of the most celebrated composers of the era, and his music became a symbol of Britain's cultural renaissance under the Hanoverians. Caroline's patronage extended beyond music to encompass the visual arts, literature, and architecture. She was an avid collector of paintings and sculptures, many of which adorned her private residences and the royal palaces. Her taste for art was both sophisticated and strategic, as she sought to use her collection to project an image of refinement and authority. Caroline also encouraged the construction of public monuments and gardens, believing that beautiful spaces could inspire civic pride and elevate the spirit of the nation. In addition to her support for the arts, Caroline was deeply invested in the intellectual currents of her time. She corresponded with leading philosophers and scientists, including John Locke, Isaac Newton, and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, engaging in discussions that ranged from theology to natural science. Caroline's curiosity and openness to new ideas made her a respected figure among the intellectual elite, and her court became a hub for Enlightenment thinkers. One of Caroline's most significant contributions to intellectual life was her support for the creation of libraries and the dissemination of knowledge. She recognized the importance of education in shaping a prosperous and informed society and worked to make books and learning materials more accessible. Under her patronage, the royal libraries were expanded, and she supported initiatives to establish public libraries in London and beyond. Her efforts reflected her belief that knowledge should not be confined to the privileged few but shared for the benefit of all. Caroline's influence on cultural and intellectual life also extended to her role as a patron of scientific inquiry. She took a particular interest in advancements in medicine and natural science, supporting physicians and researchers who sought to improve public health and understanding of the natural world. Her efforts to promote vaccination against smallpox, a disease that had devastated Europe for centuries, were particularly notable. Caroline's advocacy for this early medical innovation helped to popularize the practice in Britain, saving countless lives and advancing the cause of public health. Despite her many achievements, Caroline's patronage was not without its challenges. The court was a hotbed of intrigue and rivalry, and her support for certain artists and intellectuals often drew criticism from those who felt excluded from her favor. Some viewed her Enlightenment ideals as overly progressive, accusing her of undermining traditional values. Yet Caroline remained steadfast in her belief that the arts and sciences were essential for the betterment of society, refusing to be swayed by detractors. Caroline's efforts to promote culture and knowledge were also a reflection of her broader vision for the monarchy. She believed that a ruler's power was not just derived from their political authority, but also from their ability to inspire and uplift their people. By championing the arts and sciences, Caroline sought to demonstrate that the Hanoverian dynasty was not only a legitimate successor to the Stuarts, but also a driving force for progress and innovation. Her cultural legacy was perhaps best encapsulated in the public's reaction to her death in 1737. Tributes poured in from across the country, with poets, musicians, and scholars lamenting the loss of a queen who had done so much to enrich the nation's cultural life. Handel himself composed the funeral anthem for Queen Caroline, a moving tribute to his greatest patron and friend. Caroline's patronage of the arts and her commitment to Enlightenment ideals transformed Britain into a beacon of culture and learning. Her court became a model of refinement and intellectual engagement, setting a standard that would influence future generations of monarchs. Through her support for artists, composers, philosophers, and scientists, Caroline not only shaped the cultural landscape of her time, but also laid the foundations for Britain's enduring reputation as a center of creativity and innovation. In a world where royal consorts were often relegated to the background, Caroline of Ansbach stood out as a queen who actively shaped the intellectual and artistic life of her nation. Her legacy is a testament to the power of culture and knowledge to transcend politics, inspire greatness, and leave a lasting impact on history. By the late 1730s, Caroline of Ansbach had cemented her place as one of the most influential queens in British history. Her wisdom, diplomacy, and cultural patronage had shaped the course of George II's reign and enriched the intellectual and artistic life of Britain. Yet, even as she maintained her prominent role at court, her health began to falter. The relentless demands of her position, combined with her personal struggles and sacrifices, took a heavy toll. The final chapter of her life would be marked by both tragedy and the enduring legacy she left behind. Caroline's health had been a concern for several years. Her tireless work ethic and unwavering commitment to her duties often came at the expense of her well-being. By 1737, she was suffering from a range of ailments, including chronic gout and what physicians of the time referred to as intestinal obstructions. Despite the constant pain, Caroline refused to let her condition diminish her role as queen. She continued to attend court functions, advise her husband, and oversee her charitable and cultural endeavors with the same dedication that had defined her life. In November of that year, Caroline's condition worsened dramatically. She was confined to her bed, and the court physicians, limited by the medical knowledge of the time, were unable to provide effective treatment. News of her illness spread quickly, prompting an outpouring of concern from both the royal court and the public. Despite her suffering, Caroline remained composed and resolute, determined to face her final days with dignity. George II was devastated by his wife's decline. Their marriage, which had spanned more than 3 decades, was built on a foundation of mutual respect and affection. While their relationship had not been without its challenges, George's well-documented infidelities being chief among them, Caroline had always been his confidant, advisor, and emotional anchor. In her final moments, George remained by her side, refusing to leave the room as she endured the agonizing effects of her illness. Caroline's last days were marked by a mixture of grace and wit, qualities that had endeared her to so many during her life. Even as she faced death, she maintained her sharp sense of humor. According to court chroniclers, when George expressed his despair at the thought of losing her, she famously replied, "You must marry again, for the sake of the kingdom." To this, George responded, "No, I shall have mistresses." Caroline, ever pragmatic, retorted, "That's better. They will not meddle with politics." On November 20th, 1737, Caroline of Ansbach passed away at St. James's Palace. She was 54 years old. Her death was met with profound grief, not only from her family but also from the British public. For many, Caroline had been more than a queen. She was a symbol of stability, intellect, and compassion, tributes poured in from across the nation, reflecting the widespread admiration and affection she had inspired during her life. George, too, was inconsolable in the aftermath of Caroline's death. He ordered an elaborate funeral to honor her memory, held at Westminster Abbey, where she was laid to rest. The service was attended by dignitaries, courtiers, and ordinary citizens, all of whom came to pay their respects to the woman who had shaped their nation in ways both seen and unseen. Handel, the composer she had championed, wrote the funeral anthem for Queen Caroline, a poignant tribute to his greatest patron. Caroline's death also marked a turning point in George II's reign. Without her steady guidance, the king struggled to maintain the same level of focus and diplomacy that had characterized their partnership. While he continued to rule for another 23 years, his reign was indelibly shaped by the absence of his queen. George frequently visited Caroline's tomb at Westminster Abbey, and he reportedly kept a portrait of her in his private chambers until his own death in 1760. Beyond the personal loss felt by George II and her family, Caroline's passing was a significant moment for the nation. Her influence as a patron of the arts, a champion of Enlightenment ideals, and a stabilizing force within the monarchy had left an indelible mark on British society. Her advocacy for cultural and intellectual pursuits had elevated Britain's standing on the world stage, while her charitable initiatives had improved the lives of countless citizens. Caroline's legacy extended to her children as well. While her relationship with her eldest son, Frederick, had been fraught with conflict, her influence on her other children was profound. William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, carried forward her commitment to public service, while her daughters, particularly Amelia and Caroline, became respected figures in their own right. Her ideals and values continued to resonate within the Hanoverian dynasty, shaping its approach to governance and its relationship with the British people. The cultural and intellectual advancements that Caroline had championed also endured long after her death. The institutions and initiatives she had supported, from libraries to hospitals, remained vital parts of British society. Handel's music, which she had nurtured, became a lasting symbol of Britain's artistic heritage. Her contributions to the Enlightenment, though less tangible, helped to create a climate of progress and innovation that would define the nation for generations. Caroline of Ansbach's life was a testament to the power of intellect, resilience, and compassion. As a queen, she had transcended the traditional boundaries of her role, becoming a leader in her own right. As a wife and mother, she had navigated the complexities of family life with courage and determination. And as a patron and advocate, she had left a legacy that would continue to shape the cultural and intellectual landscape of Britain long after her death. Her story is one of triumph and tragedy, of ambition and sacrifice, and of a woman who, through her vision and strength, changed the course of history. In the end, Caroline of Ansbach was not just a queen. She was an enduring symbol of the transformative power of knowledge, art, and human spirit. The legacy of Caroline of Ansbach, Queen Consort of Great Britain, did not end with her death in 1737. In the years and decades that followed, her influence continued to resonate through the monarchy, British society, and the cultural landscape she had helped shape. As historians and citizens reflected on her life, Caroline emerged not only as a pivotal figure of her time, but also as a symbol of the transformative power of intellect, diplomacy, and compassion. Caroline's most immediate and enduring influence was on the Hanoverian monarchy itself. Her steady guidance during George II's reign had established a model for future consorts, demonstrating that queens could play an active role in governance without overstepping their bounds. She had redefined the role of a consort as one of partnership and influence, setting a precedent for figures like Queen Charlotte and Queen Victoria. Caroline's ability to balance her public duties with her personal relationships had solidified the monarchy's stability during a time of transition and uncertainty. Her impact on her children was equally profound. While her relationship with Frederick, Prince of Wales, had been fraught with tension. Her values and principles were evident in the lives of her other children. William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, carried forward her commitment to public service, though his military career would remain controversial due to his actions during the Jacobite uprising. Caroline's daughters, particularly Princess Amelia and Princess Caroline, embodied her love of learning and her dedication to charitable causes, continuing the tradition of intellectual and social engagement she had championed. The cultural advancements that Caroline fostered became cornerstones of Britain's national identity. Her support for George Frideric Handel and the arts not only enriched the cultural life of her era, but also left a lasting legacy. Handel's works, many of which were composed under her patronage, became enduring symbols of British heritage, performed at royal events and celebrated as masterpieces of Western music. The coronation anthem Zadok the Priest, commissioned by Caroline, remains a defining element of British ceremonial tradition. Caroline's commitment to Enlightenment ideals also shaped the intellectual and social progress of Britain. Her advocacy for education, public health, and scientific inquiry laid the groundwork for advancements in these fields during the 18th and 19th centuries. The libraries and institutions she supported became centers of knowledge and innovation, reflecting her belief that access to information was essential for the betterment of society. Her role in popularizing smallpox vaccination, in particular, had a profound and lasting impact on public health, saving countless lives and paving the way for future medical breakthroughs. In the realm of politics, Caroline's partnership with Sir Robert Walpole had lasting implications for the British government. By supporting Walpole's pragmatic approach to leadership, she had helped to stabilize the political landscape during a time of factionalism and unrest. Her ability to navigate court politics and mediate disputes set an example for future monarchs and their advisors, demonstrating the importance of diplomacy and collaboration in governance. Public memory of Caroline remained strong in the years following her death. She was often celebrated in literature, art, and historical accounts as a queen who had transcended the traditional boundaries of her role. Poets and writers praised her intelligence, grace, and compassion, while historians recognized her contributions to the stability and progress of the Hanoverian dynasty. Her story was told not only as a tale of personal achievement, but also as a reflection of the broader cultural and intellectual currents of her time. For George, too, the loss of Caroline was a defining moment. He continued to honor her memory throughout his life, frequently visiting her tomb at Westminster Abbey and keeping her portrait in his private chambers. In his later years, he often spoke of her as the guiding force behind his reign, a sentiment that underscored the depth of their partnership and the impact of her counsel on his leadership. Caroline's legacy also endured in the broader narrative of British history. She was remembered as a queen who had bridged the gap between tradition and progress, bringing the Enlightenment to the forefront of the monarchy's identity. Her contributions to culture, education, and public welfare became integral to Britain's national story, inspiring future generations to build on the foundations she had laid. In the end, Caroline of Ansbach's life was a testament to the power of vision, intellect, and resilience. From her modest beginnings in the German Principality of Ansbach to her role as one of Britain's most influential queens, Caroline's journey was one of triumph and transformation. She had faced the challenges of her time with courage and determination, leaving behind a legacy that transcended her own era. Caroline's story is not just the tale of a queen, but a reflection of the enduring ideals she championed: the pursuit of knowledge, the power of diplomacy, and the importance of compassion in leadership. Her life continues to inspire as a reminder that even within the constraints of tradition, individuals have the power to shape the course of history and leave a lasting impact on the world.